Welcome back to the Happy Saver podcast. I'm Ruth, a personal finance blogger from Aotearoa, New Zealand. Have you ever wondered how regular people manage their money? Well, each episode I sit down with everyday Kiwis, people like you and me, who generously share their honest and inspiring stories about handling their pūtea or money. Along the way, I love to share the actual financial details of each guest, plus the stories that got them to where they are today. And collectively, we aim to give practical tips and insights to help you do well financially. So let's jump into it and explore how money plays its part in the day-to-day life of today's guest. In mid-October of 2024, I made a coffee, I sat down and I phoned up Poto. She'd listened to my podcast for a long time and my previous guests gave her information that helped her decision-making over the last couple of years. Plus, in 2021, she and I began to email each other, and we've kept in touch ever since. When our paths crossed in person recently and I learned more about her story, well, I couldn't help but ask if she would like to join me for a kōrero. And being the kind and generous person that she is, she was really happy to share her own financial journey today. Now, Poto is her nickname, and she is 57 years old. And the Central Plateau in the centre of the North Island is her home and her gigantic playground. She loves the area and loves the great outdoors. But before I get too far into today's episode, I just have a quick word from today's wonderful sponsor. Have you ever wanted to save for a big goal, like a holiday or an expensive purchase? Having the discipline to save for a goal reduces stress and allows for the fulfillment of meaningful experiences and desires without resorting to debt. Pocketsmith is ideal to help you save up for big-ticket items such as a holiday. You begin by creating the habit of regularly setting aside money, and Pocketsmith helps you track your progress towards your goal using customizable budgeting tools, cash flow forecasts, and saving trackers, enabling you to set and manage specific financial targets efficiently. I always have a number of different goals on the go, and Pocketsmith helps me keep track of them all. If you want to supercharge your finances with Pocketsmith, have we got a deal for you. Happy Saver listeners get a whopping 50% off your first 2 months of Pocketsmith's foundation plan. To get your deal, go to pocketsmith.com/The Happy Saver. That's pocketsmith.com/The Happy Saver. Poto grew up on a North Island dairy farm with her parents, a half-sister, a full sister, and a sister who was whangai or adopted. So it was a busy, blended whānau, and Poto is the second youngest. They lived about a 45-minute drive from their nearest town, only going there once a month, and the only way, when out on the farm, to get some cash was to do some chores like cleaning out the water troughs, feeding pet lambs, and helping with the milking. She said that her parents were wary of what they bought. They were tight with money because they really had to be. Dairy, she said, only paid out once a year, meaning that they had to really manage their pūtea all year long. Both her parents were good with money, she said, and they had an account at most stores where they could charge up their purchases, and once a month her dad would sit down and write out all the cheques to post to each store to pay their account off. And Poto would often help him with that, sometimes being put in sole charge. She remembers carefully writing out all the cheques one month, only to have them all posted back as she had forgotten to get her dad's signature on them, which maybe was an early lesson in attention to detail when you are engaging with your bank. Other early memories were the in-school banking that kids used to do, where you would take your little postbook to school along with your 50 cents and they'd bank it for you. This was a way to encourage kids to learn to save money from a young age, and the lesson stuck, and Poto has always been a saver. She also mentioned a number of times during our kōrero that her mum was particularly financially aware and keen to invest and grow wealth, something that was really hard to do for a woman in New Zealand in the 1960s, 70s and 80s due to sexism being alive and thriving. This small memory points to Poto having an awareness of money from a young age and an interest in how family finances are run. Now, her dad, he was born in 1936, was the eldest of 11 tamariki. Her mum, born in 1933, was the youngest of 5. They met when he ended up in hospital with appendicitis and she was his trainee nurse. Just before he met her mum, he bought a farm, and being Māori, he was charged a higher interest rate than Pākehā on the loan he took out to buy it, which in today's world seems incredibly unfair, But both sexism and racism were alive and well. Aotearoa has come a long way, but we've still got a ways to go. Now, Poto's mum's family moved to New Zealand from Ireland, and her mum was born in Aotearoa. Poto says her mum was a bit of a risk taker for that era. She travelled quite a bit and was always interested in shares and investing. And one of her dreams was to buy a property on Queen Street in Tamaki Makaurau, Auckland, but as a woman, she could not borrow money from a bank. Not until well into the 1980s could women finally get a mortgage independently. Before that, you had to be married to a man or have a male relative guarantee the loan. It was actually an inheritance she received after her own mother's death that enabled her to purchase a property of her own, which became their family holiday home without the need for a mortgage. Poto's parents eventually separated, but her father stayed on the farm until it was time to retire, and only once he sold it did he finally have a good amount of money. Her mum went on to become fully financially independent as well. I asked Poto what was one piece of advice her parents taught her about money, and what does she wish that they had taught her that she's since worked out for herself. She really wishes she had been taught about compound interest much earlier in life. And if you invest money, it will earn interest and dividends, and then you can earn interest on that interest. Add capital gains into the mix, and it's an unstoppable money-making machine once it gets cranking. Importantly, her parents taught her how to live within her means. Because they lived remotely, she ended up going to boarding school, and while there, every week she had $5 of pocket money to budget and spend, and she always saved just a little. Plus, they taught her to always have some money set aside for just in case, and today, of course, we call that an emergency fund. Poto left school in 1984 after sixth form, or year 12, with both school certificate and university entrance qualifications. She just was not enjoying school. A lot of her friends had left, and she thought she needed to start a career. Her first full-time job was working for the Ministry of Health on Queen Street in Tamaki Makaurau, Auckland, working in a team of people pricing prescriptions for doctors. Yep, I never knew that was a thing either. It seems a niche first job, so I asked how she got it. Well, it was via an uncle who worked for Māori Affairs, and he made the introductions. And these first-hand introductions are still the best way to find work, if you ask me. She rented a room that she shared with another young woman in a very large boarding house. A matron ran the place, and they all chipped in and did chores. They attended church on Sundays, and they generally got along incredibly well. And the house itself, she said, is actually quite iconic. It's number 29 Hepburn Street, which is the house in the Taika Waititi's 2016 movie Hunt for the Wilderpeople. And I googled it. What a whare. While living there, Poto met many other young people, all Māori, who were working in all sorts of jobs or training for a trade, which exposed her to different opportunities and ideas of what work could look like for her. There were many chefs, and she said that they were the ones having the best time. It also happened that Māori Affairs were offering the opportunity to take a one-year course to train as a chef through today's equivalent, AUT, or the Auckland University of Technology. So while she studied, she also needed an income, so she worked as a waitress at a large convention centre, which paid for all her food and accommodation, leaving just $10 a week left over. The thing that continued to come up during our kōrero was that no matter her income, there was always a gap between what she earned and what she spent, and she always saved just a little. From the age of 18, she had opened a separate home ownership savings account with her bank where she would put a part of every paycheck. She said that back in the day, in order to secure a mortgage, you had to prove you could save. So setting this account up was her proof that she could. Over the years, she either used this account or a term deposit to save, and even when her bank got acquired by another, she continued to save. Now, that one-year course was enough to give her a start in hospitality, and in 1986, when she was just 19 or 20, Poto got a full-time job working the early morning breakfast shift at the Regent Hotel in Auckland, earning just under $20,000 a year, which in today's money would be about $57,000 a year. When she began earning a full-time income, she saved most of it. She would work for 5 days and then complete further training on her 2 days off, as she was working on finishing her City of Guilds catering course, which would give her an additional and well-respected qualification. So there was not much time to spare where she could spend her money, even if she wanted to. She saved her money with her bank, and around that time, Someone had mentioned the concept of compound interest to her, so she looked into it. And she ended up signing up to some type of investment, and her memory is pretty vague here, but she recalls it was very hard to get it started, very complicated, involved using a broker, and she never really knew what she was invested in. So 6 months later, she took it out, and she thinks she might have gotten out less than she put in. Unfortunately, this first foray into investing, it put her off a bit, so from then on, she saved her money with her bank, earning some interest, but not getting the gains a share market investment might have. And I can't really blame her at all. Investing was more complicated back then and far more unregulated than today. The main thing was that it might have put her off investing, but it didn't put her off saving. So once she had some skills and experience, she headed overseas to travel. It was much harder to send money home back then, so deposits to her home savings account stopped during that time, but she still managed to always put a little aside while she was overseas. So first stop, as it used to be for so many Kiwis, was London, where she quickly picked up some temporary work, which led to working at places like the BBC. She remembers that it was really hard to open a bank account in England, especially if you were wanting to move about the country, which those on their OE obviously did want to do. Banks would often try to charge extra fees, she said, which Kiwis used to make quite a scene about while standing in the bank arguing with the teller, and the fees were instantly dropped. Then she went and moved to Ireland to live and work, and she remembers they were way ahead of the UK in their banking. In around 1996, she went to Africa for a 10-week tour, then Canada, all the while working a bit, spending some of her putia, but always retaining some of it too. She said that while away, she tried to see and do things that she couldn't do at home, to go to cool places and make memories that could last a lifetime. She lived her life gathering up these experiences, and to this day, she is the kind of wahine who gets out and just does stuff. Now, one of the things she tried is the thing she actually credits as her worst money mistake. Sometime in the early 1990s, in her earliest 20s, she tried to become an Amway salesperson. Now, anyone over the age of 45 might remember this early iteration of a pyramid scheme where you sell products to your friends and then you entice those friends to sell products to their friends and you get to clip the ticket on each sale. Put simply, Poto said that she is not a good salesperson, but you live and learn. For 10 years, she just worked and travelled abroad, with her longest chef job lasting 2.5 years. Eventually, at the age of about 31, she ended up in Adelaide on a 26-day outward-bound course where she travelled from the mountains to the sea with a group of about 16 others. And like many people I've spoken to, Poto's story is similar in that she had a set of skills that meant that she could easily find work and she would settle into paid work for periods before embarking on travel. She always put a little money aside for savings and emergencies, but when the money ran low, she returned to work. Given how competent Poto is in the outdoors now, well, I assumed she must have grown up tramping, kayaking and biking, but that was not so. And the Outward Bound course was her introduction to the outdoors, and it cost her $5,000. She already had most of the money in savings, but put in a bit more mahi at work to pay for the rest. This course, she said, was to change the direction of her life. While in Australia, she worked as a chef for the famous Villiers Bakery, getting to work with and know the owner pretty well. And after each period of travel came to an end, she kept going back there, and he knew she was a hard worker and would employ her every time. And she clearly remembers Villy sat in the tea room with a pile of cash, and without a calculator, he would calculate and put everyone's pay in a little brown envelope. He would then hand these to his staff, and you had to bank it on your way home. She was earning about $14 an hour and was paid time and a half on Sunday, plus she was paying into her compulsory Australian superannuation fund. She said that he taught her a lot about money. He was an open book, and they would just talk about stuff and the financial side of running his bakery business. And I really liked that she found a person willing to just answer any question that a 30-year-old would care to ask. She returned to Aotearoa in 1998 when she was around 31 or 32 with about $10,000 in cash. Her Australian super fund remains there today, and she admits to having neglected it in many ways, leaving it in our equivalent of a default fund. And when she checks on it periodically, the company it's with seems to have changed its name or been sold to another provider yet again. The balance is about $23,000, she thought, and I asked her why she didn't pay it more attention. and why she wouldn't just roll it into her KiwiSaver in New Zealand if she had no intention on working in Australia again or paying her investment any attention. The answer is a pretty common one. It's kind of out of sight, out of mind, and one of those reasonably complicated life admin jobs that we find easy to put off. Now, if this sounds like you, I'd push you to take an interest. If you have a super fund in Australia, make sure you know where it is and how you can log into it at all times. Make sure it's in a low-fee fund and in the right type of fund. For Poto, given she is only 57, that's got to be a more aggressive fund. But if you have zero intention of ever returning to Australia to live or work, then just keep your finances nice and tidy and consider transferring it to New Zealand. Now, there's a couple of good reasons for this. I've met many people whose spouse or sibling died and they had funds in Australia. If you think the admin to do it yourself is hard, well, put yourself in the shoes of the person settling your estate. It's a paperwork headache for sure. And secondly, some people think their fund performs better in Australia, but there are now equally good options in New Zealand too. So all that to say, keep your money simple and keep it close to you so you know where it is. I bought my Australian super over years ago and I've never regretted doing so. The outward bound trip was transformative for Poto, and when she came home to Aotearoa after 10 years of working in hospitality, she knew she wanted to find work in the outdoors instead, so she began to transition into that area by building up her skills. Initially, she worked as a chef at a North Island ski lodge by day, and she volunteered for DOC, or Department of Conservation, on the weekends. In 1999, to build her skills, she paid about $5,000 to complete an outdoor leadership course at what is now called Hillary Outdoors. As soon as she started working again in Aotearoa, she started her contributions into her home ownership bank account with a plan to save for a house deposit one day. Now, without sounding like a broken record, she had never been a high earner, but she always lived below her means and saved a little. Plus, her mum had advised her to build up a sum of money and put it in a term deposit because they typically have a higher interest rate. And over the years, and with no actual plan to ever buy a home, she still continued to add to her savings. She flattered with a guy in the Central Plateau who also worked for DOC, paying about $150 a week, including food, and she slowly transitioned out of her chef work and into paid conservation work that got her outside. She worked in a national park weeding or in a pest control crew, plus she picked up some guiding on the Whanganui River in the summertime and on the Ruapehu ski field as a ski patroller in winter. She also began to add another string to her bow, working in search and rescue, something she has done for over 2 decades now. Now, lots of random odd jobs brought in enough income to get by, and she still managed to fit in some international trips based around her new outdoor hobbies too. So, all the while, in her 30s, she was still very much, and rather comfortably by all accounts, living well on a lower income. She had low expenses, so a low income was enough, but there was always a little left over for saving. In 2003, aged about 36, 37 or so, she got a full-time job working for DOC in a biodiversity public safety role. She recently found an old payslip, so could tell me that she earned just $13 an hour or $27,000 gross, which is about $38,000 today, so quite a low-paid role. It was at this point in our kōrero that I began to see the subtle shift in how she was thinking about her pūtea. By day she worked for DOC, and by night she went snowmaking on the mountain, earning an additional $12.20 an hour. But it had a bonus draw card. If you worked on the mountain, you got a free annual ski pass, which for any keen skier is a massive saving. Poto lived cheaply by renting a house off her employer, which was Department of Conservation, and given the remoteness of the location, in some areas they supply staff housing, and she jumped on that opportunity. She worked long hours, and there were few opportunities to spend her money. So, in the background, the savings habit brewed. She said there was always some savings going on, and any extra job she took, she saved the money it made, and she used some of these savings to visit Nepal and South America with friends. When KiwiSaver began in 2007, she immediately signed up, plus she continued to pop a little into her housing bank account each week. She left the mountains in 2009 and moved to the lowlands in the central North Island, where it was much sunnier and didn't rain quite as much, and she got a job as a land management officer at a regional council. And in 2009, she decided that the time was right to buy a house for herself, and she was 43. Now, what I like about this is that there never seemed to be the narrative of, you must buy a house at all costs. For Poto, when it was appropriate for her lifestyle to do so, she bought a home for herself. And by now, her house deposit bank account that she had drip-fed for years and years had a balance of $156,000. At this time, she also paid a one-off fee to speak with a completely independent financial advisor, which is one who was not selling products or investments, and she found that this was really useful for her, just to make sure she was on the right track. She really started to seek out people to help her fill the gaps in her knowledge and point out things to her that she might have missed. Her mate's brother happened to be a real estate agent, and they took her out on a Sunday afternoon and showed her what her money could buy. And that resulted in her buying the house that she remains in today. It's a nothing fancy, needed a little work, 3-bed house that she paid $282,000 for. She put down a deposit of $156,000 and got a $126,000 mortgage with, if she recalls correctly, a 5.45% interest rate. Her repayments were $420 a fortnight. A portion of her loan allowed her to make additional payments, and because she was used to picking up extra work, even with a full-time job, any extra cash went towards that. Now, there is nothing like getting a mortgage to make you pay closer attention to your money, and in 2010, a year after buying her home, a bank statement arrived and showed her that in the previous year, she had managed to pay off just $3,500 in principal, so she reduced her mortgage balance from $126,000 to $122,500, while also paying $4,400 in interest to her bank. Poto said that seeing those numbers made her feel like she was going backwards, and that more of her money went to interest payments than buying her home back off the bank. Now, this lit a spark, and for the very first time, she really sat up and started to pay attention to her money. Up until this point, she always made enough to live and felt she lived a comfortable life, but for the first time, she had a real focus and a worthy goal to shoot for. And she simply thought to herself, let's get this done. I want to pay off my mortgage quickly. And with some focused intensity, she set about doing just that. Up until this point, there was never really a vision for what her money could do for her or how she could grow her money until now, and now it was all on. She immediately stopped travelling overseas, deciding that she would only do local trips on foot, in a kayak, by bike or by car. And to be fair, well, that was really no sacrifice, as she lives in a beautiful part of the world already. She worked a council job, plus took on one-off jobs whenever they were available. And if she was going to pay this house off, she also wanted to spruce it up a bit. So she went house sitting for free so her house could be empty and worked on. She hired a builder to complete some work, plus worked on it and painted it herself nights and weekends. And when she moved back in, she invited 2 flatmates to join her and pay rent of $100 each, plus share the food and energy costs. Because she was now focused on becoming mortgage-free as quickly as possible, she didn't do what many do and draw back down on her mortgage to pay for renovation work. Instead, she cash flowed the repairs. I've said it before and I'll repeat it. It's pretty obvious to me that if you want to get out of debt, you must stop taking more of it on, and Poto believed that too. With every paycheck she received, paying her mortgage down became her focus, and she just began chucking extra payments towards it. Once she started to feel the real impact of a mortgage, Poto decided that she just didn't like debt, and that feeling stayed with her. In 2016, she paid her house off in full. And she still doesn't like debt any better today, so she has stayed out of it. She also started to invest outside her KiwiSaver using provider Simplicity. And she remains in the same house today and has consistently had flatmates who've come and gone, often visitors from other countries who are here for a period before moving on. She currently has one, and she charges $190 a week rent, which includes power and internet. And she said that if you are happy to share your house and you genuinely enjoy the company of others, it's a really good side hustle. As for her current grocery bill, she said she spends about $80 a week. She has consistently paid into her KiwiSaver, and at times her contributions got as high as 8% of her pay. Today, she has a balance of $144,000 and is in a high-growth fund with provider Simplicity. When the mortgage was gone in 2016, she diverted some of that mortgage payment into savings again, allowing her to start to travel a little bit. Her first trip was actually to Australia to visit friends and to treat herself while there, and I'm a firm believer in giving yourself a treat after such a huge achievement. While in Australia, she bought herself a $4,200 mountain bike, and after riding around with her mates, she brought it home with her. She also travelled with her dad to the Chatham Islands and did a house swap to Switzerland so she could go skiing. So much travel and so many experiences, she said. In more recent years, Poto has sought more advice and more resources to educate herself. At one point, she paid about $4,000 to work with a company called Enable Me that promised to help her grow her wealth while also encouraging her to budget. Poto said it became quite apparent that the only way they seemed to advise her to grow her wealth was to leverage off her own home to buy multiple investment properties with a property developer that they are in business with. Put simply, she said that they advised her to move away from share investments into debt and into property, which was not the plan she wanted for herself, so she ended the relationship with them. Now, I've heard the same situation more times than I can count. You pay a huge and ongoing fee for questionable outcomes, so just be mindful who you seek advice from. Poto said it was actually the completely free UK 10-week online course called Rebel Finance School that gave her both the education and the kick that she needed to pursue FIRE, which is financial independence, with the option to retire early. She said about using her income to consistently add money to her Simplicity investment instead of borrowing to buy multiple properties. At her workplace, she got pay raises yearly as she moved up the ranks into more senior roles. She had started on about $45,000 a year, and she got close to earning about $90,000 at her peak. Her career took a 90-degree turn in around 2018-2019 when she moved into biosecurity work with a regional council. Now, with a paid-for home, money in the bank, and money invested, plus a job that she liked, she now knew enough about personal finance to know that a transition to early retirement might be on the cards for her. So she worked with her employers who were supportive and proactive in finding a role that would create a gateway for her to steadily ease back her time at work over the next few years. Her beloved dad was diagnosed with cancer and he passed away in late 2020. He was in his mid-80s, and Poto explained that it was an honour and a beautiful experience to be able to spend so much time with him at the end of his life. As she explained this time of her life to me, I could see that with her finances tracking in the right direction, she had given herself the really precious gift of time. Although working, she was not tied to her role, as those with debt often are, and with no payments due anywhere, she had the freedom to be right where she needed to be, which was with her whānau. Prior to his death, he actually asked Poto to go and get his checkbook out, and much like when she was little, she helped him write out the checks that he wanted to, not to settle accounts at the local store this time, but to donate money to the causes that were in his heart, such as to his marae and to the hospice that was caring for him, and also to local community projects. They also discussed that Poto and her auntie were to be the executors of his last will and testament, and they had a clear understanding of what his final wishes would be. Now, this is such an important point to share in this podcast, I think, because for the person who is dying, they feel comfort in knowing that their affairs are all in order and that they have appointed caretakers to carry out their final wishes. Plus, Poto and her aunt, they knew that when the time came, everything they were to do was what her father wanted, and it's just such a peaceful way to hand on a legacy. And in the end, she said it took about a year to fully settle his estate. Even with his wishes being quite clear, and with the help of qualified lawyers, there were complexities to dividing up the estate, and that was simply because there were houses to sell and different assets and different amounts of money being left to different people. Poto is considered the doer of the whānau, so she broke it all down into a simple spreadsheet to make it clear to all. She said that she also took the time to share some of her financial knowledge with her whānau to ensure that each of them made good decisions with the money they each received. To break it down for you and I, she said that She and one sister now have shared ownership of a home in a small coastal town about 2 hours east from where she currently lives. She uses this as a holiday home, and she thinks she'll probably retire there one day. If that happens, she will sell her current home, which has a current value of about $775,000, and she will then invest that money. The value of the holiday home is now about $840,000, and she owns half. Her sister owns the other half, but she lives overseas and is already financially independent herself, and they talk about their futures a lot. They each enjoy the home, Poto obviously more than her sister because she lives close to it, but they also lend it out to friends or rent it out for short stints, which she said are about 8 weeks max, if there is a need to do so. It is very much a holiday home with no expectation that it must earn income. She also received $256,000 in cash from her late father, which she invested in her Simplicity High Growth Managed Fund. Her parents divorced in the early 1990s, splitting everything 50-50 and both moving on with their lives. Each of them went on to do well financially. Now, you may hear talk of increasing wealth transfer from baby boomers and older people to the current generation. Well, this is it in practice. Her father had owned a farm for many years before downsizing, so he created a large amount of wealth that he had never managed to spend. He has handed it to the next generation to manage and enjoy. So where does Poto find herself today financially? How much is she working, and what is she invested in? After going through Rebel Finance School online, she has started tracking her investments independently of the money she has tied up in housing. Why would she do that? Because invested money can give you an income, whereas your home, unless you are renting out multiple rooms, cannot. Apart from the rent she receives from her flatmate and the occasional times they rent out the holiday home, both of these houses are not assets that generate income, whereas invested money is. Her KiwiSaver, as I've mentioned before, has a balance of $144,000 and is accessible at the age of 65, so she has just over 7 years to go to access that. Her Simplicity High Growth Fund had a balance of $670,000 when we spoke in October of 2024. When she paid off her home, she then turned her attention to this fund big time, plus the inheritance gave her a very nice boost. So with a total of $814,000 invested, you could apply the 4% rule to this number for a tax-free and after-fee passive income of $32,000 a year or $615 a week. These investments will continue to grow over the coming years with or without extra contributions into them. Now, according to my math, her net worth, including property, is around $2.1 million, which is a remarkable achievement, don't you think? Which leads me nicely to her biggest financial triumph. That would be learning about compound interest, which she simply says is amazing. As a steady saver and now an investor, watching her money compound and grow month on month is quite an eye-opener for her. She still keeps an emergency fund in the bank of around $30,000, and she budgets and plans for her money so she can enjoy the trips she likes to do and just pay for life in general. With consultation between her and employer, over the last number of years, Poto has steadily wound down her work, moving from 4 days to 3, then down to 2, and then none. However, when the pressure to earn money is less of a draw card and you have a good nest egg growing for you, you get to do work you love instead. So when an opportunity to work 20 hours a week for a 2-year contract earning $60,000 a year came up, and because the work in biodiversity restoration and protection really excited her, well, she couldn't help but take it. This contract will end in September of 2025, and if they don't renew her contract, she would be absolutely fine with that. Poto has the net worth to kick back and relax now, but I've seen it repeatedly that when you try to retire early, it's pretty easy to get excited about new opportunities. And why not take them? There is no rule book for retiring early. With assets growing nicely with Simplicity and working just 20 hours a week and receiving a good income, Poto has been doing the mahi regarding her life admin. She has recently updated her own will and is keeping a closer eye on tracking her finances using Pocketsmith and doing a monthly check-in on her net worth. I'm sure that taking a look at her Aussie Super is on her list too. Hint, hint. She has been working hard on her fitness and health, and she has been planning some future trips, and one of which is a bucket list item, to visit Antarctica sometime in 2025. She's been saving for a number of years into a sinking fund, especially for this trip, and she thinks it might cost as much as $60,000, but she's actually on track to save up cash for this, so she won't need to touch her Simplicity investments. Currently, in addition to her investments, she holds about $100,000 in a few different banks, looking for the highest interest. This amount is so high because you do not invest money that you need in the short term. When she is not working for her 20 hours a week, she loves mountain biking, paddleboarding, skiing when there's snow, tramping, and walking. Her annual splurge is a ski pass, and all of these activities have her catching up with friends old and new from all over the world. Poto is close with her mum. She's getting older now and is in her 90s, but throughout her life she has managed her money extremely well, splitting it between a debt-free investment property and managed funds with a bank, plus living in her own mortgage-free home. The reason I mention this is because as she ages and faces growing health-related issues, instead of moving into a retirement home, which she could easily afford, although, being of Irish descent, Poto said that she is convinced she's broke, they have had a carer move in with her instead, which allows her to stay in her own home. Apparently, these two get on like a house on fire, and her home is full of colour and life. Theirs is a private arrangement, and the woman who lives with her is in her 40s and leads an independent life, while also caring for Poto's mum. She said that it's a wonderful arrangement that they continually reassess, but for now, it's working really well, and I love this option that they have created for themselves. It was in relation to her mum that she told me about her financial flop. Way back when she was in her early 20s and about to head overseas, she and her mum talked about buying a home together. In hindsight, she said she should have, given how much property has increased in value over the years. But such is life, and I think you will agree with me that it's all worked out okay regardless. What it also means is that Poto is very likely to inherit again within the next decade as her mother's wealth transfers to the next generation. I like that passing on wealth is natural to this whānau. Poto's mum inherited money that enabled her to buy a home, and in turn, she will continue to pass her pūtea down the generations. They have always openly talked about money, and I'm sure that there is no doubt that she will be a good custodian of it when the time comes, and she will simply add it to the wealth she has already created for herself and with her father's inherited money. Now, as we near the end, it occurred to me to ask her what the most extravagant thing was that she had purchased recently. Well, it was not the $32,000 she spent on a 2016 car back in late 2022 when she updated a car that she had owned for 19 years, but a few $1,000s spent on the tickets and flights that she bought to attend Tribe Fi, which was a personal finance meetup in Sydney in October of 2024. Poto and I have been in touch since 2021, and we met in person for the first time at this event, which was fantastic. And finally, she, like many, is still looking to grow her network of people that she can just openly and frankly talk money with, and attending Tribe Fi helped with that. Plus, she has her sister and myself to kōrero with anytime she likes. But like attracts like, and slowly she is gathering like-minded people into her orbit. While that builds, she had a good list of tools and resources to share, which helped her help herself over the years, and they are Rebel Finance School, which you will find at rebeldonagans.com. They run it once a year, starting in midwinter, and then they leave the content online for 6 months before taking it down in readiness for the next year, which continuously has updated content. I want to stress that you can learn all you need to know for free, so please don't get sucked into paying thousands for an online or in-person course. She also enjoys reading the Aussie Firebug blog and Money Hub due to its extensive range of topics that they cover. She picks and chooses key episodes from the Everyday Investor, Choose FI, Money Made Simple, and the Making Sense podcast, and listening to Your Money by Mary Holm on Radio New Zealand. Books she recommends are The Barefoot Investor. She has given his Barefoot Kids book away to a few people. Die with Zero, which she loved because of his message to do stuff while you can. 20 Good Summers, The Simple Path to Wealth, and also Atomic Habits. Now, I'm pretty much at the end, but before I wrap up, I have another quick message from today's sponsor. If your finances are holding you back from living the life you want, try Pocketsmith out. They've got the tools to help you make money management easier. And have we got a deal for you? Happy Saver listeners get a whopping 50% off your first 2 months of Pocketsmith's foundation plan. To get your deal, go to pocketsmith.com/thehappysaver. That's pocketsmith.com/thehappysaver. As with many of the people I interview for my podcast, our friendship began slowly over emails. In 2021, Poto was on the hunt for information. She'd been heading down a few avenues that didn't sit quite right with her and backing out to take another path. But steadily she tracked towards the FI community and a more simple path to wealth. As always, I was happy to play a small role in her feeling accomplished with her finances, but at the end of the day, all credit goes to her. At its core, her strategy is super simple. She tracks her net worth monthly, she budgets the income she receives and manages her day-to-day money really well. She always saves, but she enjoys spending her putia too. She has an emergency fund because as an independent wahine, if she runs into strife, she wants to save herself. She pays into her KiwiSaver consistently over time, and at the same time as that, she actively put in the mahi to get herself completely debt-free, and then she stayed out of debt. The next logical step for Poto was to invest her money, and for her, choosing a low-fee provider meant that she could truly watch compounding in action. All the while she's created a really good life with a home she enjoys, now a holiday home that she part owns with her sister that she gets to enjoy too, and plenty of activities with friends, either on water, on land, or way up in the mountains. Plus, in her working years, she has continually updated her skills, which has steadily increased her income over the years. So she created a good framework for herself and was on track to become completely financially sorted on her own. Inheriting from her father meant that her timeline was sped up a lot. And what I love is that she didn't waver from her original plan. Because she had really put in a lot of time to educate herself about how to handle her putia, or extra unexpected windfalls just got slotted into her existing plan. I see a lot of people inherit money and they try to treat that money as something different, something special that needs an extra plan, and they veer off their own path. Poto didn't, which means that today, aged 57 and with a net worth of about 2.1 million, she can actually do pretty much anything she wants. That's financial independence right there. And to end, I just wanted to say a huge thank you, ngā mihi nui, to you, Poto, for sharing the timeline of your life with me and my audience. It always takes me a few big days to create these episodes, and I've really enjoyed mulling over your journey and pulling a few things out that Johnny and I can use in our own life. And I hope that those listening have done just the same. So that's all from me this week, and if you want to get in touch, you know you can find me over at my blog, thehappysaver.com, where I share a lot of information about how I manage money in my life. Plus, if you sign up for my fortnightly email, I'm always linking to other useful personal finance blogs, podcast books, and money-related content. So thanks for listening. I hope you took a few nuggets of wisdom from this episode that you can now go and apply to your own life. And please do share the Happy Saver with your friends. It's still the best way that people can learn about the podcast. And I would love it if you would talk more about money with your own friends and whānau and help me continue to help others be better with money. So until next time, happy saving.